ago, I entered the beautiful and historic Colorado College Tut Alumni House front door. First time in several years. I approached a very young lady at the desk, explained who I was, showed her the colorful flyer of Mrs. Yalich, and asked for her assistance. I began by saying, you may not know who Barbara Yalich is, but she is a CC alum and was the vice president here years ago. The lady broadly smiled at me and said, everyone knows who Barbara Yalich is. Feeling a bit on the old and out of touch side, but not really surprised at this comment, we attended to the business I was there for. So, young, middle-aged, and old, poor or rich, everyone does know who Barbara Yalich is. I have personally known Barbara for nearly 20 years. We have a very dear friend in common. When Dave Rich informed me that she accepted his invitation to make her a Pearl of Wit and Wisdom, I was delighted. Barbara and I worked at CC at the same time. Barbara as the Vice President of Alumni Development and College Relations. I would see Barbara going in and out of the Armstrong boardroom, always looking stunning. With complete, it's true and you know it, with complete composure, never flustered in her extremely pressure position. Barbara retired shortly after I arrived at the college, but she remains very visible and special at the college events she attends today. Barbara, nearly a native, as she has lived in Colorado Springs since she was 3 years old, attended Steele Elementary School, graduated from Colorado Springs High School, and then on to Colorado College, where she graduated in 1953. Upon graduation from CC, Barbara Neely married a young, famous Tiger hockey player, Milo Yalich, and they made their home here in what was our little town. Mr. Yalich was a very successful banker and well-known businessman and sadly passed away 4 years ago. From the caption in the Pillar preview, we know how incredibly amazing this woman is. I will not go over all of her accomplishments as you have read about them and know them. Instead, I would like to add a few things that were not in the Pillar preview and things you may not know. Barbara won the Outstanding Fundraising Campaign Volunteer for the Year in 2002 with Partners in Philanthropy. She also won the Philanthropy Award in 2010, and now the award is named after her. Barbara also won the Athena Award for Business Leaders in Colorado Springs. She became the Unstoppable Woman in 2008 and is nominated for the Community Leadership Award in 2014. She was the CC 50-Year Club Induction Ceremony Speaker in 2003 and was president of the esteemed group in 2010 to 2012. Of course, there are more accolades, but these are the most recent. With what you have read about her in the Pillar preview and what I have just told you, you are in complete awe of this lovely lady, as am I. And now let's welcome our April Pearl of Wit and Wisdom as she takes us down memory lane.
That's really too much. But appreciate it. I know you mean well, but
Really do.
yeah, it's just too much. So when you live long enough and they stretch out all these things that are said, it sounds wonderful. You know, you can go on much longer. So I very much admire Pillar and have over the years, and one of these days I'm going to retire from some of my volunteer jobs so that I too can attend Pillar, and I know that you'll enjoy Jay Chimino in a couple of weeks when he comes. That'll be fun. Can you all hear me? Okay. I'm going to spend most of my time reminiscing and talking to you about how I think I have arrived at the things I'm doing. But then at the end, I want to talk to you about my current passion, which is an effort called Innovations in Aging. And are we all at that place in life? Are we all here together? Except Barbara, of course. Yeah. But yesterday on NPR, I heard one of the opening statements that a woman was making, and she said that memory is such a wonderful thing that we don't appreciate it enough. And what's so wonderful about it is that it really shapes us and tells us who we are if we can remember all the things, or at least most of the things that happened to us before. But in recent times, I find myself more and more puzzled by the workings of my own mind. My daughter and her husband are often irritated at me when I reference how old I am. I say I'm 83, and counting, and they say, "Oh, stop it. You're going to be here forever." And we all know that's not true at all. And they try to tease me out of it then because they call me Babs, which they know I really don't like. But I know they mean well. And then I remind them that they are just exiting their younger years, and they're going into the baby boomer retirement years, and so that kind of settles them down. But I think it's marvelous that we have gotten to live in this era, because I'm so fascinated with the new knowledge and the new inventions and all the things that we have to enjoy. And I've been particularly struck by that as we listen to the news of the missing plane and what they've done to search, and to think that they're exploring in the bottom of the ocean in places where no one has ever been, and with equipment that no one knew existed just a few years ago. And that's marvelous, even though the reason for it is sad. But I love microwave ovens and frozen food and polyester and cars that will drive themselves, that we can just get in and say, "I'm going here," and the car will take me there. That sounds wonderful. I like Facebook, although I don't really use it very much. But I like reading other people's Facebooks, computers and televisions, and I especially like remote controls. Isn't that wonderful when you think about it? You can just stay on the couch and punch a button and it takes you to another place. I love that. And then I think about the things that frustrate me and make me feel inadequate. And one of those is when someone says, "What's your password?" And I just go into a brain freeze. Password, what is it? But that's because I have about 25 passwords at least, and that's dumb on my part. But anyway, I hate when somebody asks me that. I find myself spending a lot of time looking back over a lifetime of experiences, and which of these had a really long-term effect on my thinking and who I am. I imagine you do the same, but here are a few of mine. As my introducer said, the growing up in Colorado Springs in the 1930s was absolutely a joy. A city of less than 30,000, and we lived down on San Miguel by the fire station. Don's the only one who remembers all this. And I went to Steel School in North Junior. I never knew that my family had had terrible, terrible times in western Kansas, because we came out here in 1933, and as part of the Dust Bowl era. I didn't know where Pearl Harbor was, and I didn't have only a very vague notion of where Japan is. And during the war, we were busy at Steele School collecting metal junk, and we would pull wagons up to the school, and there would be this big pile of spare parts and used stuff, and then they would come and haul it off, and they'd give us much praise for all the wonderful work we'd done. And one of the things I always think about is that we also saved bacon grease. Did any of you have to do that? And then when we get a jar of it, my mother would get a jar of it, we'd take it up to Wilson's Market and turn it in at the butcher counter. Now, what that bacon grease was ever used for, who knows, but it kept us busy. And a friend of mine once, a speaker once said, you know, somewhere in America there's a giant mountain that's made of bacon grease left over from World War II, because it wasn't really used for anything, but it kept us busy. I think it probably was used for something important, but who knows. And then during the war, we collected ration coupons for gasoline and sugar and, you know, various things. Shoes, that always stuck in my head, that we had to have a coupon before we could go buy a pair of shoes. I had big dreams then of being a concert pianist, because I took lessons from a couple of wonderful women, and one of them I particularly loved and admired, and she loved to go to the major concerts at an auditorium in Denver, and so we would drive up the highway, which was called the Ribbon of Death, and we heard all the greats of the world, Paderewski and Rubinstein and Horowitz and so many others. And later on, I realized that I was not cut out to be a concert pianist, because you had to work really hard, and I was not, that committed to it. But one of my piano students is here today. This is Julia, who was one of my piano students, so that's pretty interesting. So, and I had the great pleasure later on of teaching many little kids. As she said, I did go to Colorado College after high school, and I met and married Milo. And he was not only a hockey player, but a World War II veteran, 5 years older than me. And I was 19, and I did not stay to graduate from CC. Later on, I was awarded an honorary degree, but I had only 1 year of college, and that was so common for women in that era to go for a year, and then when they married, you were done. And if you were really committed and dedicated, you would go back to school later on. Well, I got busy and didn't get around to that. Milo was of Serbian descent. His parents immigrated from northern Minnesota prior to World War I. His father was killed in a mining accident when Milo was just 2 years old. His mother stayed on in that small mining town where there were many ethnic groups. There were Polish and Italian and Scottish and English, and many languages were spoken up there, and all of them stayed close together, and they all celebrated together and went to church at their own faith base, and so that was the kind of an atmosphere that he was raised in. Everybody skated, as nearly as I can tell, because that's all there was to do. It was freezing cold up there, just 60 miles south of the Canadian border. And he learned all the customs, the cooking, the holiday celebrations, all of that. They did prefer to speak their own language, and Milo's mother never spoke much English. I knew, when we were married, I knew little about European history, and especially the struggles of ethnic groups in those Slavish countries and so many other places. And later on, we had the great pleasure and experience of traveling 3 or 4 times over to the old country and going back and really learning history where it happened. And what a wonderful thing it has been for me and for my children to have a lifetime of learning and living in that environment. And I still hear my children use Serbo-Croatian, especially for swear words and inappropriate words, but they still toss those out every once in a while, and we very much have adopted the recipes and the traditions now, and I hope they'll pass them on. Another chapter for me was. Really another learning experience was early in my married life. I began to sample a number of volunteer experiences, particularly through the Junior League, which is a women's leadership training organization. I was the local president and later became a regional director and then president of the International Association. And my nice husband was so supportive of me that he really stayed home and kept the kids going to their activities, and I would leave and fill the refrigerator with frozen dishes. And my children say that they were raised with a series of yellow stickies stuck on the washing machine and the refrigerator and the stove. It could be true, actually. But I traveled all across the country visiting leagues and learning about their programs and learning about their communities, learning a lot about how organizations function and what makes them be healthy organizations and what makes them fall apart from time to time. And then I had the opportunity to have lots of experiences in leadership training skills. These were the days of the civil rights movement and of Vietnam and the loss of the Kennedys and Martin Luther King and so many dramatic changes in our country. In our ladylike language that we used in the Junior League, we didn't call it the civil rights movement. We called it societal trends because we thought that was more ladylike and less threatening. So I never dreamed that the leagues themselves would be caught up in this issue. I thought we were observing it from a distance. But then the Junior League of Rochester, New York, did indeed accept an African-American woman who was actually a lawyer and a highly qualified woman, and she had every right to be accepted. But everything came unhinged because in that organization we had the free right of transfer to any league in the country. And so, of course, many southern leagues were terrified that she had a plan to move to their league and, all would be lost. So this opened up a whole organizational revolt and a financial disaster, potentially, because they were all going to withhold their dues and secede from the organization, and a very mean-spirited conversation. And I, being from Colorado Springs and living in sort of a sheltered kind of environment, I was shocked at what I heard and the way people really felt about things and the injustices that were happening. So the meaning of all this for me was that it really woke me up to the very real divisions in this country, and I started reading a lot about the Constitution and all the history, the Federalist Papers, and all of those things that we as Americans profess to believe in and what were the very basis of our country, and then contrasting that with what was going on actually in the country. And it made me appreciate that we have a tremendous journey ahead of us. And I, at the same time, was traveling to other leagues around the country. Kansas City, the night that Martin Luther King was shot in Memphis. And they called me in the middle of the night at the Hilton Inn and said, "We're coming for you at 6 o'clock in the morning. We've changed your flight. Your visit here is canceled because we're so frightened about what's going to happen in Kansas City." And so they took me to the airport, and I left. I went to Los Angeles when Watts was in flames. I went to Detroit, which was that city was in flames. In New York, we were at a banquet at a big hotel in the nicest part of the city, and were locked in the ballroom for 4 hours while the sit-in was going on outside or something. So to me, it was just mind-boggling what was going on and what was happening, but a very educational experience. I finished this in 1970. I had a short-term job in the mental health field. I was director of the Mental Health Association, and really enjoyed that a lot, and probably would still be there. But Colorado College then approached me and said that they really wanted to build the alumni organization and make it a nationwide movement, and also to do a better job with their fundraising. So I went to Colorado College under the direction of President Lou Warner, who was this delightful Missouri-born Southern kind of gentleman, kind and mannerly, and you always did your best because he made you feel like you just had to do your best. And then Mr. Brossman was my boss, and he was a former journalist and a kind of a tough guy, and I learned a lot from both of them, but especially Mr. Brossman. I really learned a lot about writing and articulating what I wanted to say, because I would work on whatever letter or paper I was taking or I was preparing, and I would sort of with trembling hands go into his office and lay it on the desk. And so he never spent very long on it, but it would come back all marked up and read, and he'd say, "That's not quite right, but you're getting there," or something like that. So I really learned the value of smoothing things out, and what a wonderful teacher he was. I began to learn about working with people, what makes or what persuades individuals to make gifts to an institution or an organization and do it over the long term, not just an occasional, $25 for this or that, but what brings about those lifetime commitments to programs and to other needs, and what then persuades them to, after they've started with small gifts, what incentivizes them to move to larger giving if their circumstances are such that they can do that, and what makes people begin to talk with you honestly about what their intentions might be. Money's a very personal thing. Giving is a very personal thing. And lots of times people don't want to ever do that. But it takes a lot of trust between the individual and the staff member to make them understand that it's okay, and that you will retain their confidential information, and that you're being square with them about what the needs are. Surprisingly, such conversations sometimes begin with a real criticism or a grudge that people have carried for years. And as I traveled around the country, I would often have somebody really unload on me about some imagined thing that happened, or somebody that didn't treat them right, or it could have been a faculty member, or something on a sports team, or something in a sorority or a fraternity. It could be almost anything. Or part of the time it was just where they were in life, their first time away from home, and things were not going well, and they were kind of displaced anyway. But they carried those things for years and years, and so and then sometimes it would start off with a negative interchange at the very beginning of the conversation. And I remember one time in particular when we went to a very fancy businessman's club at the top of a skyscraper in Dallas, and I had waited and worked, months to get an appointment with this gentleman. And so I was so thrilled and looking perky, I thought, and appropriately dressed and all that. But we sat down at the table, and he looked at me with this withering look and said, I hope you're not here to talk to me about money, because I am not giving anything to Colorado College. And so how do you regroup after that, what you feel about yay high? And but somehow, we got past that, and I kind of kidded him out of it. And he never did give any money, by the way. That was a given. So, but it takes patience, and sometimes it really is hopeless. But then, more often than that, people would talk to me about the deep gratitude they felt for Colorado College and the experiences that happened to them there, and what it meant in terms of their lifetime of living and learning. But some people will always stand out in my mind. I'm grateful and inspired by a phenomenal chemistry professor and his wife. We determined when he finally made his gift that his salary had never been higher than about $3,000 a year. It was in Depression days, but he and his wife had been interested in the stock market, and apparently they must have had some really good fortune and some good advice, and so they had done very well. And first of all, he died first and left generous endowed funds for scholarships. And then when she passed, I think about 8 years later, she added to it. And to this day, there are numerous chemistry majors going to Colorado College, because of what those two people did. Another one of my favorite guys was a copy editor from the Spokane newspaper. It was about yay high, and hadn't heard from him for decades after he got out of college. But then one day he surfaced and started coming to reunions and was very interested in what was going on, and we got along just fine. It turned out that he liked me. I was sort of okay, but he really liked Milo, and had gone to so many hockey games, and he wished Milo had been a Phi Delt, because that would have been a better choice than being a Sigma Chi. But he just the difference between the two of them, this small guy in the polyester suit and Milo, but they really got along well. And when this gentleman passed away, who would have ever known that he and his mother had largely inherited their holdings from the family had been founders of the Jolly Green Giant company, and so when you buy a can of vegetables, always buy those of the Jolly Green Giant. it's for the important foundations, and that's what I really want to talk about in terms of philanthropy. We live in such a wonderful country that where the early day wealthy families in this country had this great sense of philanthropy and doing good for others, and it really started in the eastern cities in Boston and New York and Philadelphia, and then spread across the country to the Twin Cities, to St. Louis, to Kansas City, and as we settle the country, our country, that great philanthropic ethic spread across the country too, and that's why we are blessed with great orchestras, with great museums, with great civic buildings, with all the large buildings that we have in our cities, and they kind of set the standard for us. Many of them are still operating today, the Rockefeller Foundation and the Ford Foundation, and they kind of they ebb and flow depending on their leadership and their current interests, but they are there for us. And in this city, of course, we're very blessed with Stratton and Penrose and Palmer and all of those people. So I have a great appreciation for that. And one particular philanthropist who came into my life that I never would have imagined is a woman by the name of Edith Gaylord Harper, now called Edith Gaylord. I met her when I was traveling with the Junior League, and she's from Oklahoma City, from the Gaylord family down there. And but she did go to Colorado College, but only for 2 years. Her father had been a trustee of the college, and later on Edith became a trustee herself. But the biggest things about her were that she was a real visionary, a student of the world. She was modest and thoughtful, but also, like Mr. Brossman, she was critical of efforts that didn't meet her standards, and so she also would return my drafts of things, and with her comments on them too. But by that time I'd learned that was okay and we could work through that. She was a journalist, and she was the first woman member of the Associated Press. And she became a member of Eleanor Roosevelt's press corps. She came back to Oklahoma City about the time that I first met her. But she had had wonderful experiences as a child. She told me about that she had been sent abroad, as so many children were in those years, been sent abroad for a year of schooling in France or Switzerland or someplace, and that she and her mother had attended the first session of the League of Nations. And she talked about how it felt to be a young lady and to sit there and to watch all the members of the League of Nations walk in their native dress, and that she just never, ever, ever forgot that. She never realized that she was a well-to-do woman, and in fact, we'd go out to dinner at the Broadmoor. That was her favorite place to stay. And she would always be slow to pick up the check. And it got to be such an issue that I finally called her attorney in Oklahoma City, who was a good friend of mine by that time, and I tactfully explained this problem and what should I do about it. And he said, "Oh, good grief, just go ahead and grab it and say, let me help you with this." She'd never let us pay, but he said, just offer to help her, and because he said she has trouble with her handwriting, and it embarrasses her. So if you offer to do that, And he said, by the way, don't worry about what kind of a tip that you leave, because he said she honestly doesn't get the difference between a $25 tip and a $2,500 gift. So just put down whatever you want to. So when she established the Inasmuch Foundation, and I'm sure many of you have heard of that, it was in 1982, and she did it with about $200,000. And that was not really enough for a foundation corpus, but later on much, much more has been added to it. We make grants here in Colorado Springs to a small extent, but mostly they are in Oklahoma because that's their home territory. So knowing Edith, and she's been gone now 10 years, and but that opened my eyes to so many things, and I'm really grateful for that. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about innovations in aging. And I don't know how much you've been reading about, there was a wonderful article in the Denver Post a couple of Sundays ago on the front page about the silver tsunami. I don't know if you saw this. Pay attention to all these articles that you see. They're very important. Aren't they, Shannon? You know. Because this is the aging of America, and in fact, all across the world, the aging of our population is a gigantic change that has been going on for 5 years and that will continue to go on for probably the next 20, because the senior people are way overshadowing the birth rate. And for instance, they talk about the number of baby boomers who turn 65 every day in the United States is 10,000. 10,000. The percent of increase in the 65 and up population in Colorado is 32% just in the last 10 years. And the estimated percent of increase in the 65 population in Colorado by 2030 is 150%. 150%. And so this is a change that not only has to do, it's not health care, it's not altogether health care. Of course, that's a factor. But it has to do with housing, with transportation, with care. So many seniors live alone and don't have any family here because families are dispersed now. They live in all across the country. And so our communities have to really reshape themselves in terms of how we look at aging and how we prepare for it. And I think an example that's of interest is, years ago, Colorado Springs began the little community centers, and there's one down in Stratton Meadows, there's one in Deerfield Hills, there's one in Hillside, there's one in, of course, the Senior Center, which is such a wonderful program, in Gulf Acres. And there's a community center out on the west side. But they are limited. The city has not had for years enough staff and enough money to really make those vibrant programs. And even though they're so important because they do health checks, they serve meals to the low-income people. They provide the only gathering place that many seniors have. But the growth in the population, which is unattended, is the county where we have the TriLakes area, which has a huge senior population, Fountain, which has a huge senior population. So we are not beginning to meet the needs of that. Many of our seniors live on very limited incomes. and I'm talking under $1,000 a month. And some of them are living on $800 a month. And how can you pay your rent and buy your groceries and get around? It's a staggering challenge that we have. So we became interested in this and assembled a group of similar people, and Jim Barry is one of the people who's been with us. And I was interested when the chancellor at the university, and I know you've heard her in one of these talks, but she, because of the gerontology program up there and because of the CU Aging Center, our university, which is a fine institution, has for a long time been very interested in senior issues. And at one point, Pam Shockley said, there's so much going on in this town and with seniors, but everybody's so busy and they're kind of working in silos. And so they don't bother to look across the street about what that other agency does or what the potential changes might be. So we began to sit down and look at that. And we are we swore we would never incorporate as a new group, and we may be term limited at some point, but we do have an incorporated group right now to work on these issues. And we continue to work with the university and with Pikes Peak Community College. We're working with Colorado Springs Park and Rec, especially with the West Side Community Center, which is quite a program over there in the junior high school over there. We have begun to work with some of the churches, because through EMS and through other contacts, the parishes are a wonderful source of information about their senior populations and great support groups that can emanate out of those out of the churches. We have we're working with business. We're working with governmental groups, the city more than the county, although the county is now coming and wanting to know what's going on. The mayor is very supportive. El Pomar is very supportive. They've let us have an office out there and at the Penrose House. And the hospitals are very interested in what's going on. So we are learning, and we are helping build collaborations where we can. And we're just at the beginning of this innovations process, and so I urge you to really pay attention, read your papers, and read the numbers, and look around you, and realize what's happening with the population. We're working with Aspen Point, also I should mention. So, and many other organizations. Oh, the Senior Resource Council, the group that has that works with the residential care and the in-home care. So it's a broad-based effort, and we don't have anything at stake. We're not a service provider, but we want to be helpful where we can. And so I encourage you to watch for things that talk about the senior tsunami, and dive in wherever you feel committed to it. So I thank you for your attention. I think you've learned a lot about me, more than you ever wanted to know, maybe. So